Hi, this is Vinita Bhatia. I'm the editor of Campaign India, and I have with me the first monk in an organization which is now known as monks. I have Yoke. I'm going to ask you, how do you pronounce your name? Because I will make a
That's
mistake.
all good. That's all good. Jouke Vuurmans.
Yuka Fumans. Okay. He's a CCO and a partner at Monks. And we're just going to have a chat, Yuka, about your experience in Cannes. We're
Yeah.
just winding down. How has it been so far?
Good. Like everybody, it's been hot. At least everybody's saying it's been massively hot. I've been in a room like this, air conditioned, so I have had a lot of cold, nice experiences. No, but it's been good. A lot of clients, so that's nice. I met a lot, heard a lot, and well, at least we were talking about. I was happy to be in the Palais for a couple of hours, just to look around, look at the workers. That's obviously the most important part. Still, so I had a lot of fun and good
So,
parties and good
any,
parties.
yeah, but is there any particular work that really caught your attention?
So maybe I was talking to a couple of colleagues of mine. We didn't feel that this year there was like that specific case that you like. You always have a couple selection of cases where like yeah, winners. Clearly, it was like little less centered around like specific cases. I felt like, but more a couple of really individual cases that I liked. I also like the Vaseline case. I think it's very nice than the originals. Um, I like a lot of the Mercado Livre work.
Mhm.
I saw with the piece. I like the barcodes one that they created in the field. That was one of my favorites. So
It won a Grand Prix.
yeah, I won a Grand Prix exactly, and rightfully so. I think it's just there's such a smart little insight, right? That makes the difference.
Mhm.
So no, I think that and it's a lot of cases where I felt like it was clearly centered around the human, the cultural component. Like I like that shift that it's super responsive now towards what actually consumers are doing and behaving.
So, both the cases that you mentioned, you're right. It actually dived into something which was culturally driven, which was human centric. But a lot of the work that I noticed seemed to have leaned towards dashboards, seemed lean 40% of the work, incidentally, as per reports this year
Mm.
that were presented in Cannes, had some or the other element of AI built in.
Yeah.
So, do you think that somewhere there is a dumbing down of the human intelligence in the work that we are seeing?
And what do you mean with dumbing down?
As in, we are actually going to the artificial intelligence and the tech and the data and letting them drive what is the kind of campaigns that should result of it, rather than letting the human learning be the genesis of an ad.
I would actually say that's probably too simple of a way to look at it because the way I start seeing AI being put in the creative process is it helps us to get more insights because we as humans can only interpret and analyze so many data points. It's just there's always a limit to it, and in the end, strategy always started with data points. So that research component is very important. That's where the human insight is coming from. And I've seen it actually more as an empowerment in the process than anything else, because it helps us to unlock more little nuggets that we otherwise wouldn't been able to capture. So it is less about, I think, AI in that sense. It's more about how it's being used and applied in the process, in the process of creation. Because I think it is, if like the modern creative team and the modern strategy team would actually benefit a lot from just using it as a starting point, but then use the human brain and the human intuition to take out what is actually working. So I think it can help us a lot.
So, there's yet another observation that I had while I was going through the work. I don't know if it resonated with you, that almost all the case studies showed the kind of social impact that they had,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
They did mention about some of the earned media they got across
yeah,
various of the channels, but a lot of it was about the kind of social media conversations that
yeah.
was there, the feeds that, it was there, the conversation on digital platform was there. And the reason is that for years you have argued that digital advertising is still built with a TV logic.
Yeah.
And if consumers are giving social ads barely a second of attention, given the kind of content overload that we have, what is the biggest creative habit that the industry refuses to abandon?
Well, I think it's still that notion of singular storytelling. I think it's still we're focusing on hero assets. Like for every client, we have the hero and we have the adaptation or the digital or the social. Like that is a weird habit that I think we really need to let go, because there is no hero anymore. There is no moment. And even I like the World Cup, probably the biggest, most interesting, and from a creative perspective, also most biggest masterpieces were the Nike, the Adidas, those type of big campaigns, big films, clear master asset. But if you think about it, how long did it take you before that spot was gone out of your algorithm, out of your feed, out of our site? Very fast, 3 days, 4 days maximum. But what started to pop up again were all the other content that they created in that ecosystem, little small nuggets. So I think that if you think about now the media consumption, but also just the media algorithms, it works so completely different that I think we need to let go of hero, and we need to start thinking about every little piece of content being something that you can basically elevate into a beautiful moment. I think it's the same thing with like performance media, brand media. I think everything needs to have a combination of both in it. So it's that sort of traditional still confined, where yes, TV scripts are being let go now, luckily, to your point, but still like we're thinking so traditional, and like you have a hero, you have a couple of things that you completely graduate on if it is about finding the perfection. And then we just
Let it fly.
let it fly and do scale, and it's suddenly not really considered as creative anymore, where I think that's still a big mistake.
So, if I were to also belabor on that, the creation of hero assets was also because it was very easy to make it a lot more effective at one point in time, because the relatability was higher.
Yeah,
So, if you had, like, for example, there was a football ad which had Timothy Chalamet.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
the resonance is so much stronger, even though he's probably more a US personality, that it rides across various geographies.
yeah.
If one were to let go of such an hero assets from, let's say, a celebrity's point of view or a brand logo point of view or something like that, and try to create smaller elements of it, do you still think that it will be as effective?
Well, I think what you're saying is less about the hero asset. It's more about maybe it is a hero asset if you think Timothy Chalamet is the hero asset, but that's maybe it, right? That is the hero asset in your campaign, not the actual format. And because what's fun about like that Adidas campaign is he was in the hero film, but then he had also his own kind of little spin-offs with behind the scenes, with like little tricks, and he did, and finding back his old friend and play together football game. Like it's that I think is what I'm aiming for. It's not necessarily that the hero asset as the form as sort of the formula.
Hmm.
Because how do you relate to your clients or your customer isn't related to an actual 30-second, 20-second key visual format. It's about your concept. It's about your creative system that you create. Where in this case, a celebrity rightly chosen, talent good, right chosen, can bring that efficiency or that effectiveness and that connection and relevance, and not necessarily your suite of assets that you create out of it. I think that is what I would say is the nuance to your point, is like you're 100% right, but I don't think it should be connected to then that one specific asset that we create out of it as the hero ad.
No, you're right about it, because then if you do not bank it on one particular element, you are able to spread it out that
Yeah,
much.
exactly. And then make with, in this case, Timothy, make with him something that really matters in the moment, right? Make something that is super authentic in certain social areas, but you can also bring him to life in big brand moments outside. Like it's more about the contextualization of him and the freedom from a creative perspective to bring him to life in something that makes sense for that moment, than that you're stuck to a specific format.
Fair enough. So, last year when I visited Cannes, the one thing I felt is that everybody was either wary of AI.
Massively, yeah.
Yeah, everybody was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is going to take away our jobs.
Yeah.
It's the end of creativity.
There were also some provocative statements coming out from like the Metas, Mark Zuckerberg, connect your bank account to us and we'll do the rest, right? So I think that was the year of like,
Yeah, it was like you are either this side, it had
exactly.
polarized the entire
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
there's a lot of experimentation that is going on. But now in this year, whenever I've spoken to anybody, it seems that the conversation has shifted to execution and, more importantly, orchestration.
yeah.
Seeing how these tools are hardwired into the processes, the systems, and your media planning, your consumer conversations that are there. Now, what is the difference between a brand using AI to make more assets, right? And a brand using AI to make better decisions? Because it's a tricky thing to do.
I, it's like you read our pitch. It's exactly what we're trying to get our clients towards. Is less about the execution side of AI. I think it's great, but I think it's also in the end a decision if you want to create everything with AI. I think we need to be very smart in the world. Because there's a public opinion about AI too. And I think a brand can actually capitalize on the fact that they are using real humans and authentic moments. But if you connect that to really who you are as a brand and what is important. So I think it is a decision less about the execution, and the real competitive advantage will come the moment you start using it as more of a decision device to your point of view. The more I really like always the phrase that we use in Germany. The intelligence gets you closer to consumer, gets you closer to the culture, and eventually also closer to conversion because you need to understand what's working and what's not. And I think that will create the actual competitive advantage for other brands because then you know what's happening, then you know what is right. But it also sets you free in the creative space again because the validation in that process is so important for clients to feel reassured that whatever creative you can come up with is the right creative. And right now, I think that is one of the biggest blocker, if you ask me, in doing good work is always do clients buy it or not? Do they feel comfortable or not? Like we had a conversation in the Palais. I was at stage with the Effies around effectiveness, and there was one thing that came up as well with the winning case was how how do you make sure that you bring clients along in the process to reassure to create reassurance that the idea works really well? Because there's always that risk component. So I think that that is going to be the biggest difference for brands that are you really using it as a decision device. It is also allowing us to do better and more interesting creative work because we have that trust we're leaning on.
So can you give me any examples of brands that have managed to, actually cross over that line and be effective by using it effectively, if I were to say?
I think you see a lot of the more modern technology-driven brands doing that already. Like I think that it's a little bit of a culture as well, right? Then they're used to technology, they're used to data. We're working with a couple of those brands as well. Um, I do feel like from a systematic point of view, it's still a little bit slim. Like to your point about orchestration, like I think this needs to be almost an infrastructure that runs your entire marketing operations and potentially even beyond that, because the insights you will gather will be very effective for your wider business as well. But it's the younger brands, the fintech banks do it really well. Where I think the disconnect is that it's not always used to set creative free, right? So you see it probably very fast going to more of a performance mindset immediately, and I think that's where I would still say we have a lot of opportunity.
And this is very interesting observation, by the way, because earlier it was the CPG brands that literally
Yeah,
laid down the playbook, right, for marketing that is there. And they still do. They still
yeah,
own the
sure.
space. Nobody's taking that away from that. But what you mentioned is about, the new age brands.
Yeah.
You may call it challenger brands also. They are the ones who are more adept at, embedding it and embracing it. So there seems to be like there are two different playbooks that are there. One is more focused on long-term brand building,
Yeah.
and the other one is like, okay, we want to build a brand,
Yeah.
but our runway is shortening. So let's have something that will also give us quick outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's always the balance, especially in the now. And these more newer generation brands, they don't have that traditional brand playbook. So you do see them leaning sometimes even fully on more performance marketing, which I think will have the longer term impact or negative impact.
Mhm.
But it is like I don't know. I think that there's an interesting space with the two sides basically, where I think they can learn a lot from each other in that sense. But also, like we shouldn't forget organizational complexity with this as well, because I think that's like if there's one thing where AI is, I think lagging or what is the bottleneck at the moment, then it's the humans and the organizational side of things, because that's where we said like the technology is there. Like if you use the technology in the right way, it's there, it's powerful enough. Yeah, every year or sorry, every month there will be improvement on it. That will keep happening, but it is there, but the humans are now the bottleneck in terms of using it. So the more complex the organization, the more fragmented, the more siloed teams you have, yeah, the harder it would be to work in that type of way because the investment still need to be made. You don't have that type of system and infrastructure in a minute. And the younger generational companies, the tech companies, they are built differently, right? They're built on technology. It's helpful. They're less complex. So that's also a component you should keep in mind with this. Is that it is not an easy path for someone to transform.
So when you're having a conversation with your clients, how are you, as a creative person, as well as someone who's also a technocrat, helping them find that path? so that, they have best of both worlds?
Well, it's like definitely there's not one playbook. So for starters, that's so there's we cannot come in and say this is what you need to do. So it is about understanding a little bit where they are from a maturity perspective. But some clients we literally just do trainings and workshops and get them to kind of feel familiar before we start identifying. Okay, let's do your social first with AI, or let's just start more with like an effectiveness component around data and dashboards. So it's helping them find where kind of the energy is in the company. Because what's most important is that you don't look at this as a pilot, so one-off that you do in isolation of the rest. You do it within the actual operation, and you try to find quick wins. So the more you can get a quick win, like let's say it is your social, it's your always on, right? Get that in a good place, get your team very excited about this, and from there, build that out and grow. And there are a few. There are some brands that really have a top-down strategy now that just do also complete reorg behind this. So then it gets kind of more foundational. So, but that's like I mean, that would be my advice to the C-suite is like make it really a strategy because you then can change specifically with the larger operations. And there's one simple small human truth, I would say, which takes this to hopefully a better place, which is humans will always look at these changes from like a perspective of threat. Anxiety comes up. That's a human first reaction. You have a group of people out there that get instantly excited, but that's a very small group compared to the big group that will always look at the negative, at the downside. I have a phrase for it, like it's sort of black mirror versus the white canvas, because the white canvas is where you need to take people, like the idea of new opportunities. We can suddenly do these new things, and that's what me as a creative, what I'm super focused on getting people excited about this because I honestly think to an earlier point, like I think you can get a lot more creative work out of this. We can use it as an enabler to get ideas approved better, get more little small moments. Because I remind you, like a lot of ideas cannot be executed, couldn't be executed because of the budget restrictions around production. Right, that's always been the biggest thing. That's the bottleneck in the process. Now that's gone, so your ideas can be actually brought to life. And we had so many examples in the last year alone where ideas were shelved at clients because they couldn't produce it on against the right budget, and now suddenly we could create beautiful films, beautiful content. So I think it's about that human components that don't feel fear. And what we've done in the company, and now we're also doing with clients, is weekly 15 minutes of AI is what we call it, and 15 minutes of excitement creation.
Okay.
Hey, this is what's happening. Look at this. Look at and internally we focus a lot on internal use cases, so people kind of our monks see what other monks do and like, get excited about this. But also give them like the backdrop, like understand what is happening, why, what is the tech possible of, what's the latest news. So everybody has like a frequent and a cadence of being exposed to the good thing, good part, which makes them kind of step over. And also there's one component is homework. Just try out. There's a little fun thing. Let's try this out just to get people going with it and hopefully shift them from that Black Mirror mindset to more like Kenton mindset.
So, I think that rewiring is really helping out because from what I have found out, Monks has reported a 500% increase in AI driven discovery.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's, I mean, it's a staggering number.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if consumers are increasingly discovering brands through AI agents rather than search engines or websites or even advertising, what becomes a new battleground for brand differentiation? This is especially because now the interface is no longer owned by the brand.
No, no. Well, so I think there's a fundamental component that you weirdly enough now need to articulate your brand better than ever. So ironically, we go back to the sort of very core of our business, right? Is build a brand, create a brand, and then go out there and sell the brand. I think more than ever, you need to have a good brand definition. Because if you won't be picked up. You won't be smart, and you won't be able to articulate it. And I think the articulation of it will help even more generic interfaces that won't own to recognize your brand. So it will be able to connect your brand more likely to the contextual relevance of whatever you're looking for. So I think a part of the battleground is inevitable happening in those places because where search was just giving you just results back, the GEOs, the search engines, the generative engines will give you more a contextual reasoning why a brand is right for what you're looking for, which by default is a brand story. So I think that is what the insight from my last year is like. We need to go back to brand building. We need to go back to a way more sophisticated articulation of your brand. And if you don't have it, you need to find it because we need to exactly know why you are the brand you are and why you are important for your audiences. And it needs to be sometimes even cultural specific, right? Because the people are looking for certain things. Or if you're a performance brand, or you have different audiences, what type of performance, you need to be it will go very deep in that sense. But once you have that, I think you can play there. And the other part I would say is completely disconnected from the digital space. It is, if you ask me, we might we'll see probably digital still being a big part, obviously, of the media mix. But I also think it's going to be almost more part of your day to day business because, indeed, to your point, like we're going to get more an agent to agent kind of relationship. It's going to be focused more on getting something rather than feeling something. And I think that feeling will start to happen somewhere else. And I wouldn't be surprised that in 5 years from now, we're sitting here and we have a slightly different media mix if it's about brand building. It's about maybe the true one-to-one emotional connections again. It's about on the street. It's about being in, is it festivals, if it's events, things like that. Well, where I think the brand relationship will take a bit there, bigger spin, but potentially also more in your own spaces, to your point, like your customer service, those type of areas where I think we've seen it a little bit, like we've seen good examples where customer service could be a really good brand building tool. And we see also those being dying again. So it's an interesting space, but I wouldn't be surprised that brand building would have a different format in
But this also becomes very challenging for you, right? Because there's so many changes, whether it's CEO, SEO, whether it's GEO, whether it's showing up on LLMs, right? Then it's also about helping the brands to scale efficiency.
yeah.
But they also have to ensure that, these kind of discoverability is not coming at the cost of flattening the emotion that the brand stands for.
No.
It's not flattening the intuition that the consumer feels for the brand. And it's also, like you correctly mentioned, the cultural relevance that can create long-term customer value because an agent an agent talking to another agent will not be able to communicate that very clearly.
No.
So that's the tricky part.
The only thing what I would say is an agent on the one hand won't articulate that clearly, but the other point we shouldn't forget is an agent is going to be someone's representative, right? So, um, and this is I think it's still a little bit futuristic if you think about how it would really evolve. But in the end of the day, what I mentioned, AI is very good in context and very good in understanding context. So I think in that contextual moment, the more context we can, as a brand, can give the agent, the better it can translate it back to the context of the individual person. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think the biggest unlock, even from like an intuition, a humanity feeling, we can bring it across the moment you start seeing those connection points to the individual user. Why is it interesting for me? Because that is what the models are doing. It's the why, it's the articulation, the context of it. So I think again back to the brand thing. It is more like a codified way of bringing it across, and then the emotion will need to come from the actual moment that we create. And yeah, in more of a prompt kind of interface, the emotion is text. So it is a harder way to bring it across. But it then will need to happen on other places where, which I mentioned, I think will be a sort of a build up. It's also important, I think that's the other thing. It needs to it needs to be aligned and connected and consistent everywhere. So I think that's that the emotional connection can be made by confirmation constantly about the same thing. So maybe your agent is advising you to go with this brand, but that does reference or is connected to what you've seen from the brand somewhere else. So that's validation. And by the way, that's also how the models work, how GEO works. You need to have proof. Without the third party proof, it won't be picked up. So it's not enough to message who your brand is. It's about showing who your brand is as well.
So, my last question to you, Yoga, is this. You mentioned about the 15-minute, sessions that you have internally and also with your clients. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction, you were the first monks.
Yeah.
A lot has changed since then. You're seeing the technology has changed. You're seeing brand aspirations and expectations have changed. You've seen how the agency models have changed. How are you training the next monks to keep up with all of this, and it can't be in a 15-minute
No,
exercise.
absolutely not. That's obviously one component of it, just a driving force. And by the way, I was the first creative monk, like I'm not the first monk.
Yeah,
But
no, 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 no. I do the
that
way
will
that.
be that.
I
And the
get.
creative monk
We'll
is
both get in trouble.
where we both get in trouble, exactly. No, but it is layered. So it start with make that strategic decision, as I mentioned, what every company should be doing. What is our stance with AI? Where are we going? And the strategic decision for us as a company was when 4 years ago we saw that inflection moment with AI being so powerful. For us, it was more of a uh-oh moment because we knew AI. We're working with AI way before that point. So we understood the power, and we also understood the existential threat it has on us as a company, as well as in the industry. And I think that triggered us to say, this let's not leave that on the side. This is going to be a central point of what we're going to be focused on. And we saw it's also going to be potentially a competitive advantage for us. If we do this right and fast, we can be ahead when it really hits that threshold where it's now, I think. So it comes from a strategic decision to go full in. It also then with that strategic decision comes from an internal definition and focus. So we've had a lot of sessions that talk about us internally and our plans, and also the fact that if you work at Monks, you have to be open to do this change. And we were very in specific a couple of countries. So we have a couple of countries which we are considering more as our trial market to really push ahead. So try to be like 12, 18 months ahead. So we learn because there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of scar tissue that's coming along with this change. So it's not easy. We're definitely not going to lie here and say, AI is amazing. No, it's like hard for the individual. So we do want to test it out for before we scale it out. But in those markets, we've also been going very, I would say, respectful as far as you can be in that moment, and go to our people and say, look, if you're not considering or if you're not open for it, that's all good. Like we understand it, but then you might need to consider to move on because we're gonna be full on. So it's basically focusing on the right personalities, the right people that are open. And it wasn't about skill set yet, right? Because we all need to learn. So it was more about mindset and mentality. People that are committed, that want to change, that want to innovate, is what a monk is in that sense, and want me to be. So we shifted that. So that's the second component. And then the third component is a combination of tools and training. So open it up for the right tools. We have our own tools that we use, but we also just promote using just the tools out there and have separate versions of training with a company-wide training just to get everybody to like the basics of AI, and doing a lot of training or in let's say community-specific places where we sit with teams and we try to get like the best-in-class version going. But it's a rolling thing. Like there's no, and this is where it's so complex compared to the old transformations where you have more of a playbook of
Mm.
transforming. There's no playbook for this. So the training we did like in December for our strategists, which we did actually, now need to be already refreshed, right? Because other tools are out there. Claude made a huge difference in terms of how the power of tools can help you. So it's also a constant thing. So it's like these three layers that help us to move, and then those 15 minutes are actually more of a constant accelerator. Right? It's constantly just reconfirming. Sometimes we do a training in that. Sometimes we have one of our executives people talking about where we are heading, and sometimes it's just about showing a new tool and get people familiar with the new tool.
And which are these testing markets that you have currently?
We're very focused in the Dutch market. So
Is
the
that
Netherlands.
because it's your home ground?
Well, honestly, a little bit. And it's not home for everybody in the company, but it's home for like the media monks or media monks business. But it is at least where we have two things. One, it's a centralization of indeed the technology talent combined with some of the creative talent. So we have the right people on the ground, and in the end, we need to figure it out together. So it's important that you can keep the people closely together. And the second thing is we do have the let's call it the reputation. So it's easier in the market. Like people know us from being a more technical driven creative company, a lot of productions. So it's an easier way for us to go to market with this. And we've seen good signs. So that's also good. Like we've seen that market growing. So it's a really positive signal for us. There are some markets which I'm very like what's happening in Latin America. There's a general, not even from us, but the general from the market appetite to change. So we see some really good progress around doing some AI transformational work with clients there. So that's was something that we should start analyzing. Like Latin American market starts to be a really good training ground as well. AI in other markets like Europe is tougher because there's also bigger regulations in the market. So clients are in general a little bit more limited and concerned. So that's where you deal with those kind of market realities that also limit us a little bit in that transformation.
Well, thank you so much. That was really insightful, and I enjoyed getting such a deeper insight into the whole creativity and the AI and how you're doing a lot of experimentation around it. And yes, I hope in another 5 years when we are back here and we have this conversation, it will be more about how deeply entrenched it is, and maybe we go back to what this festival initially started with.
I think, yeah, I 100% agree with you. I hope that that's it. I see it, but I hope we as an industry see that this is actually the next unlock for the next generation of creativity because I truly believe it's there. So deal 5 years from now.
Absolutely. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you.
And as you heard from Yoka, he is a monk who's definitely, I don't know whether he sold his Ferrari or not, and whether he owns one, but he has definitely earned this scar tissue. This is me, Vinita Bhatia, editor of Campaign India, signing off. Stay tuned for more such insightful episodes.